Being very entitled and controlling, narcissists have no difficulty stepping all over your personal boundaries. So that's why I put together an extensive video class called This Is Me. It has 25 videos, written documents, guided questions. I'm going to teach you how to have healthy boundaries. There's a link below, and I hope you'll find it to be quite therapeutic. You may have heard the phrase, out of sight, out of mind. Well, sometimes that can be an appropriate kind of thing to think about. When somebody's gone, you just don't think about them. But there are so many times when a person has had long-standing relations or very significant relations with a narcissistic individual that a person may be out of sight, but they're definitely not out of mind. I've had so many stories with individuals who can look back and say that the narcissist in their life was so egregious or so difficult or so contrarian that the impact has lingered with them for a long, long time. I mean, for example, let's suppose that you had a family situation where there was this one person in the family that was just this absolute tyrant, and anger and harshness and meanness and control, and it can impact the emotional atmosphere of the home greatly. Or let's suppose that you had what you consider to be a very close friend who later on stabbed you in the back, so to speak, to the point to where it ruined some other social relations. Or let's suppose you've been in a work setting and someone just made your work life miserable and hindered your career. Let's suppose that you married someone and that individual turned out to be a disaster, but then it had a lot of impact for extended family or children or grandchildren. I mean, the possibilities are endless. And when a person says, okay, I'm moving on, I'm leaving, so many times they bring with them patterns of living that still reflect that narcissist presence in their life. I wonder how many of you might be able to think that very same thing. It's like, oh yeah, the narcissist was gone X number of years ago and I'm still dealing with the lingering after effect. I want to talk with you about 8 of the most common patterns that tend to hang on after you've gotten away from a narcissist or you're trying to grow away from that person. The more you're aware of what these patterns might be that are the net result of you having been with that person, then the more you're going to be able to make decisions about moving on to a better direction. Now, the first pattern that I see when individuals have had long-standing and negative strains and difficulties with that narcissist is it's the pattern of ongoing trust issues. The narcissist inevitably proved to be not at all trustworthy. And in fact, it may have been that that narcissistic individual was in a position of bringing you into their confidences only to make things really miserable for you. So you eventually move away from that. But then the question lingers in your mind, well, who else might do the same thing to me? Who can I trust? And when you've been burned, and sometimes you've been burned by multiple individuals, it can be very difficult for you to say, well, I'm just going to put myself out there and trust again. Or a second pattern that tends to be very common is you can have a sense of defensiveness when there's no particular reason to have the defensiveness. I wonder if you can recall being around somebody and you might say something innocuous like, hey, I noticed you did this. What was your reasoning for that? And that person can say, why are you asking? Do you think that I did something wrong? And they can be super defensive and you're just simply saying, I just asked you a very innocuous kind of question. But many times when you've been on the receiving end of someone's anger or harshness or judgment, it can cause you to have such a quick reaction of defensiveness that lingers with you in other situations where it's really not warranted. A third pattern that's very common is you can have lingering guilt and shame. Now, you've heard me say in other talks that narcissists themselves are highly shame-based, and by that I mean they figured out a long time ago there's a grading system, a judgment system out there, and they wanted to figure out how to beat that system. So what they did is they decided, well, if I'm going to be shamed, the way I'm going to resolve that is I'm going to shame other individuals even more so. And that way I'm on the top of the stack so they win. And so many times narcissists will make comments to you. What's wrong with you? Or you're such an idiot, or you don't know what you're talking about. And they gaslight you whenever you say that this is something that makes sense to you. They'll just roll their eyes, and there can be all sorts of micro communications along those lines. The whole notion they have is, I want you to doubt you. And eventually, when you have enough guilt and shame and judgment on you, it's like, yeah, they finally win. And you begin wondering, well, am I as difficult as that narcissist portrays me to be? And that can be have a lingering impact on you down the road with other individuals. A fourth common pattern that's a part of the aftermath is that you can embarrass easily, or you can be motivated by humiliation. So many times that narcissist, as I mentioned, will do the gaslighting. Like, why did you come up with that? Or you think anybody's going to take you seriously, or you don't make any sense. Eventually, you begin thinking, I don't want to expose myself. I sure don't want people to know what I've lived with. Some of you have had some very difficult and painful repercussions. For example, the loss of a child, or loss of a job, or loss of money. And it's like, I don't want anybody to know all of my strains and lows. You feel duped. You feel stupid. And as a result, it's like you have this guarded sense about you because you've been so humiliated that you fear others joining in on that bandwagon. A fifth very common pattern that we have, and this is one I know that some of you have been through this, but it's you can get into your own pattern of self-sabotage. When you've been associated with strongly controlling and domineering individuals, you can kind of have this attitude that says, screw it all, I don't even care anymore. And so you can have this sense of irresponsibility that comes through in your life. Some individuals, because of the difficulties they've had in their history, develop addictions, or they may have anger issues that come along, or they can have passive-aggressive attitudes. It's like, I'm just not going to cooperate with people. I don't even care anymore. Or that leads to a sixth common pattern that is a result, and that is sometimes in the aftermath of that narcissistic relationship, you can develop cynicism in general. You've been criticized, you've felt very futile and just chronically frustrated and exasperated. And so as a result, it can lead you to become critical and agitated. You find fault even in innocuous situations because you've had so much negativity that's a part of your life. And that can become a part of who you will eventually be. A seventh common pattern is what I refer to as emotional numbness. Sometimes when you've been around somebody that's constantly invalidating you or negating you or sabotaging you, you just kind of have this notion that says, leave me alone, go away. I don't want to hang out with anyone. You withdraw. You can go into depression. You can go into defeatism where you just think, you know, life is no good. I'm just pulling back. Why would I want to engage with anyone? And so you just go numb. And in doing so, you become a shell of who you used to be or might potentially be. And then a very strong eighth pattern that I see is you can become controlling, or if you already had control issues, you can become increasingly controlling because of your exposure to the narcissist. That narcissist tried to control you, was very overbearing and domineering, and you could respond by thinking, you know what? That's not going to happen anymore. I'm going to be in charge. I'm calling the shots, and you can get to the point to where you're too overbearing and too stubborn and rigid because you don't want anybody playing that role toward you. You can see that when you are exposed to someone who has their high control and selfishness and anger and defensiveness and false self and superiority, it can pull you into what I refer to as that codependent dance, and you wind up playing along and reacting to them in ways that you otherwise wouldn't really pronounce. Is it possible for you to get away from that? And of course, that's what I'm all about. That's what therapy is all about. In order for you to minimize these lingering effects, it's going to be important for you to remind yourself the narcissist needed you to be uncertain, They needed you to be dysregulated. They needed you to defer to them, which means that you don't have much of a mind of your own. You were trained by an expert manipulator, and they did a real number on you, but because they were trying to, they saw you as their narcissistic supply. They wanted you to act in a certain way so that they could feel better about themselves at your expense. It's also going to be important for you to realize that by definition, narcissists sought control over you, which means they didn't want you to remember you can be free. Freedom is not defined as wanton irresponsibility, but freedom means that you have the privilege to choose for yourself who you're going to be. And so as you look at these patterns, a good question is, well, what does a free me look like? Who do I want to be, and how do I want to conduct myself? What are my preferences and my priorities and my own personal values and opinions? And anchor down on that. Looking back on your time with that narcissist or those narcissists, you can remind yourself that many times you felt hesitant, but sometimes you saw warning flags or were indicators that said this wasn't real good, and you wound up not paying attention. One of the things that you're going to need to do as you move forward is to watch for the warning flags. Listen to what your gut tells you when your intuition says something's not right. Learn to trust in yourself, and then give yourself permission to be distinct. You don't want to be so reactive to the narcissist that you wind up being tethered to them. I'm hoping you can lean into your own unique version of who you are, your beliefs and your preferences, like I said. Let's keep in mind that you are dealing with an erosive effect on your personality. That's what the narcissist wanted to accomplish. Be patient with yourself, because it's going to require some time to turn that ship around, so to speak, and go in the better direction. Don't assume that the narcissist has to change or understand for you to move forward, but go back to your basics. You were meant to be loved. You were meant to be respected. You were meant to be encouraged. Start with yourself with those ingredients, and then extend it to others. And then let's see if we can bring out the best version of you. Now, I hope the videos such as this can give you some good food for thought and help you understand what you're dealing with and the ways that you can move on beyond that. That's what I'm trying to do here. If you haven't already hit that subscribe button, I would encourage you to do so. We're going to keep more videos coming towards you. You can watch them on a cumulative basis, and hopefully there'll be an educational process. If you have a need for therapy, and many times when you're going through something like this, that would be most appropriate. You know that I've been sponsored by the people at BetterHelp.com. There's a link below this video that will take you to their website. There's a whole team of licensed professional therapists. All you have to do is fill out a couple of forms, and you can go into that space. I've had good results. It's affordable. It's accessible. Please, if the therapy is needed, please seek it out as would be appropriate. In addition, speaking of, I have my therapeutic courses. This is like signing up for an online class. They're very extensive. Each course has at least 25 videos or more, and then there's written documents with each video with guided questions meant to take you in a certain direction. We have Ready, Set, Connect about making good connection skills. We have This Is Me about establishing your boundaries, Free to Be, finding yourself despite those controllers. And along with that, we have my webinars, which have a different kind of format. They're on the website. And on the website, we have many articles. We have my podcast, the Surviving Narcissism podcast, and books, plenty of resources. Okay, the narcissist wanted to erode you. They wanted to rob you of your own uniqueness. As you look back and see what their tricks were, I'm hoping you can decide, rather than me just being reactive, I'm going to understand what the potential patterns are, and I'm going to define for myself what my healthy alternatives are. And when you're able to do that, that allows you to go into a place of steadiness, which I'm hoping can lead to, you to finding your place of peace.